At 14, the Pelicans have plenty of options for who they could draft. Here are the four most intriguing prospects they could take. You have Leonard Miller, Bilal Coulibaly, Maxwell Lewis, and Brandin Podziemski. Let's break them all down in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Let's go.
You are Locked On Pelicans, your daily New Orleans Pelicans podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome to another edition of Locked On Pelicans, the daily podcast covering your favorite team, the New Orleans Pelicans and NBA, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, available wherever you get your podcasts and available on YouTube. I'm your host, Pelicans Insider, credential member of the media, Jake Madison, at NolaJake on Twitter, here with y'all on this Wednesday. It's Game 3 of the NBA Finals tonight, so make sure you listen to Locked On NBA as your second listen today, because I'm on there giving you adjustments the Heat should make and the Nuggets should make. I'm on there every single Wednesday. But right now, thanks for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're doing draft coverage like no one else is giving you, looking at the four most intriguing draft prospects the Pelicans could take at 14. Let me know if you like any of Leonard Miller, Bilal Coulibaly, Maxwell Lewis, or Brandin Podziemski. And today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Last-minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. I find all four of these prospects super interesting. And there's a couple themes involved, and there's a reason I'm kind of grouping them as the four most intriguing prospects. Guys that I think could go at 14 or maybe a little bit lower, but they're in the range. And I think the Pelicans, who have Maxwell Lewis right now in for a workout, could really like all of these guys. And it's going to allow us to talk a little bit about draft strategy and the direction teams should go at 14 versus, say, the top of the draft. And you'll get what I mean, but there are some big traits between all of these guys. And let's start with Leonard Miller, because I think he is a good example of what some of those traits are. And it's guys that have super high ceilings, and it's kind of built off of a lot of their physical attributes for the most part. One of these guys does not fit into that, really. That just are kind of freak athletes that if you can mold into being an NBA player and teach the skills, well, that's big, because you can't always teach speed. You can't ever teach height, length, those kind of things. And Leonard Miller at 6'10" with a 7'2" wingspan from the G League Ignite is a great example of this. And what makes him so interesting is he's a guard in a big man's body. He had a big growth spurt in high school, which forced a change of position, and you see it in the way that he plays. This is a guy with a really fluid handle that's strong with both his left and right hand, and isn't scared to put the ball on the court and attack the basketball. And with the playing like a guard, you see these big strides that he takes. He just effortlessly gets to the rim. Remember when Jackson Hayes would cover the length of the basketball court in like 3-4 steps? It's similar to that, just these big, gigantic strides, steps, whatever you want to call them. Jax does it, Trey Murphy III does it, and it allows him to score in a variety of different ways. It allows him to get to the rim, scoring over guys using either hand. It allows him to score in mid-range when the rim is walled off from him. And with that overwhelming height, he knows how to use it and uses it to score over players very easily. He's also an above-average rebounder. I wouldn't call him elite. He's still kind of figuring that out, and he's a good enough rebounder, and he can get better at that. He's also a willing passer. Again, plays like a guard at times in a big man's body. When you have that kind of talent and skill at that size, your eyes get wide open, and he has an excellent vertical leap too. Shooting's a concern for him. He does not shoot well from three and hasn't at really any point in his basketball playing life where we have statistics for that. For the G League Ignite last season, 32.7%, and there were times when he couldn't buy a bucket from deep. And defensively, this is where we get into the intriguing part. And basically intriguing is high, very, very high ceiling, but also a very, very low floor. They could be anywhere in there. Who knows, right? Could even be a boat. So this is what makes him so intriguing, is that defensively, he doesn't play like a big man. He has the size of a big man, the body of a big man, looks like a big man, doesn't act like a big man. The physical tools for him to do so are there. He is a very good vertical at 37.5 inches, but reaching his potential of what he could be as a player is years away, would take a lot of work if he ever gets there. Think Jackson Hayes a little bit. And we'll talk about this more in the next segment too, when we look at Bilal Coulibaly. And I think he's kind of one of these guys that fits into this profile as well. And then we'll look at Maxwell Lewis and Brandin Podziemski in the final segment. So when you look at a guy like Leonard Miller, all of the physical tools are there. 6'10", 7'2" wingspan, agility and speed like he has, kind of plays like a guard, a strong handle for a big man like that is otherworldly at times. And then you realize how raw of a prospect he is and how much more he needs to do, and that he is years probably away from really impacting you as a winning basketball player. Rookies take about 2 to 3 years to really impact your win total when they start to work out, particularly on the defensive side of the ball. It takes a while sometimes. This guy's further away than that, I think. So you're already adding to that. But if it all works out, oh my God, could he be something truly, truly special? The Ringer has his draft comp as Paul Millsap. I love a player like that, especially at 14, and a guy that doesn't always need to be the star and can kind of fit in with the other guys that you do have. But can he develop a three-pointer? I'm not really sure. You know, at times, you saw him play down to the level of competition, and while I think the G League Ignite is good, there were moments when he didn't look that good playing against some of the better stars and better players that he could have. And I think you look at that with some of these guys too, and I'll talk about them more with Maxwell Lewis and Brandin Podziemski, that concerns me. And I don't love that from these type of guys. And so stuff's there to make them be really good, but it's still a big question mark of if they'll ever reach that. And the floor could be really, really low. And that's something that worries me. But that's what also makes these guys such intriguing prospects. A little bit of boom or bust to them, I think. Leonard Miller potentially being one of them. But the size and the athleticism and all of that, the physical traits, all there. Can you coach up the rest of them? That's the big question. Let's look at another prospect, Bilal Coulibaly out of France, played with Victor Wembanyama, still playing with Victor Wembanyama. Another one of these guys with all the physical tools, but can you get the rest out of them? And that's what I think makes them so intriguing. That's coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And today's episode of Locked On Pelicans is brought to you by Gametime. You don't need to be stressed out buying tickets, whether it's for planning months in advance or just buying them at the last minutes like I tend to do. I don't plan things out months in advance. You probably don't either. If you know there's something you want to go to, or you just realize there's a concert in town. That happened to me a week or two ago, and I did not realize it, decided I wanted to go, and I got tickets for cheap. The Cure was awesome. So buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. And Gametime has deals on tickets right up to the day of the event. Get exclusive flash deals on tickets for football, basketball, baseball, concerts, comedy, theater, whatever it might be. The Gametime guarantee means you're always going to get the best price if you find the same tickets in the same section and row for less. Gametime's going to credit you 110% of the difference. So download the Gametime app. Create an account and use code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONNBA for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday. No one else comes to y'all like this, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. For your second listen, go check out Locked On NBA. I'm there every single Wednesday, our national show, breaking down the biggest stories around the association, around the NBA. Get caught up on what adjustments the Nuggets need to make, the Heat need to make, and is playoff Jimmy Butler a real thing? I say yes. We play real or fake every Wednesday, and we break that one down too. It's a fun show, so make sure you tune into that. And, of course, if you want to support Locked On Pelicans, best thing you can do, become an everydayer. Listen Monday through Friday, covering everything you want to know about this Pelicans team. I want to look at Brandon Ingram playing for Team USA in tomorrow's show. Then Friday, we're going to bring a big one in, getting Scoot Henderson on the Pelicans. And I'll tell you why I think we need to actually think about this. That'll be Friday's show for the everydayers. Never miss an episode here. Today, though, we're looking at the four most intriguing draft prospects out there, and I want to look at Bilal Coulibaly. This is a guy out of France, plays for the Metropolitans 92s at France, the same team that Victor Wembanyama plays for. And man, similar profile-ish to Leonard Miller in terms of the physical tools are all there. My goodness. He is 6'7" with a 7'3" wingspan. Think about that one for a second. He's a defensive first presence. And when you watch him, the effort on defense jumps out at you. He closes out to the perimeter hard. He gets into the passing lanes, especially with that long wingspan, pokes the ball loose, leading to transition opportunities. And he's a smart help defender. He knows when to rotate over. He knows when to come over from the weak side. And he actually blocks a lot of shots that way. Plus, he can guard multiple positions. And you see him have really good strengths. You can't really back him down. He can kind of guard everywhere. And the physical attributes give him, again, this is like a theme in some of these guys, long strides. They just effortlessly get to the rim, and he's a good finisher around there. And he also works well off ball, cutting around, trying to find space to just do something. And for the Pelicans who want to run more of a motion offense, that's a guy that could fit. He's not a scorer yet. Just 11 points per game last season and 34.2% from three. And he definitely needs to improve his mechanics because they are not particularly great. There's just, overall, when you watch him play, a very raw aspect to his game. He almost looks like a newborn at times out there on the court. Like he just is still learning about basketball, and you can very much see it. Very unpolished, raw prospect here. And again, that's where the intrigue comes in. Defensively, that dude's going to be a menace and is going to be a very good defender in the NBA. Can you get enough offense out of him? Think Herb Jones here in New Orleans. Amazing defender. But does the lack of offense mean it's not going to work out? Do you also need to add another guy like that to this Pelicans team? And again, that's where the intriguing part of today's show all comes in. All of these guys, I think, that we're going to look at, including Maxwell Lewis and Brandin Podziemski, have really high ceilings and very low floors. Jackson Hayes had all the physical tools. I loved him coming into the draft. Thought he was a perfect guy to pair next to Zion Williamson. Take him at 8th, no problem. Even in a mock draft we did, when I fake traded Anthony Davis away to the Celtics, I took Jackson Hayes, though, later in the draft, 17, whatever the pick was, later in the draft to pair next to Zion Williamson. I thought he made a ton of sense. And the physical tools, we've seen it. They're all there. The dunks, some of the shot blocking, the way he runs the court. But it didn't really work out. You have all the physical tools, but just never put it together for whatever reason. A lack of shooting. A lack of basketball IQ. And contrast these type of players in Jackson Hayes to a guy like Keegan Murray last year, drafted 4th overall by the Sacramento Kings. He was not an insane athlete. You would never project Keegan Murray to be an all-star or star player. He had a very limited ceiling that wasn't like too low, but a very high floor. You knew he was going to be able to contribute right away. You know he's going to be a solid NBA player, and you never complain about having a Keegan Murray on your team. And this is where the draft philosophy talk, I think, gets kind of interesting in your approach to the draft. And there's no right or wrong way to go about this. And it comes down to personal preference. But NBA teams, especially in the top 5, top 10, tend to draft based on ceiling and how much of a star they could be. When you look at the majority of all NBA guys, they are drafted in the top 10, really the top 5. That's where you have the best chance of getting one of those guys. It's not like you draft someone at 25 and, more often than not, they're an all-star level player. It's not how it works. It's very different than the NFL draft when you can find these kind of diamonds in the rough later. Like, yes, it happens. Jokic is a great example of that. Draymond Green's a great example of that. But that is, and even Herb Jones, right, who's never going to be an all-star, but a solid NBA player. However, when you need a guy to lead your team to the finals, they're usually very high draft picks for the most part. So when you're doing that, you tend to draft for ceiling and not always play it safe there. Does that change at 14, though? At 14, where cool, we'd be able to get a solid guy, then let's go with the guy that we know will contribute, or do you need to go kind of big? Boom or bust? do the Pelicans need to do that given the roster that they have? Or is it better to, to use a baseball analogy, go for singles rather than a home run or even doubles? And that's where I think this gets interesting. Yeah, you can get one of these guys and they could end up, particularly a guy like Maxwell Lewis, who I think has the potential to be an absolute star, like star level player in the NBA. Even though I don't love drafting him because the risk of it not working out is so big. And if you have another failed draft pick here, how does that impact the team? Or do they have enough draft picks for the future that you can take some chances? I'm curious what you think. Let me know in the comments down below. So Coulibaly fits into that. Not a scorer, but he looks like he's going to last in the NBA. He's generating a lot of draft buzz. Or do you just need more scoring? The Pelicans' defense was good. Do you need more defensive first guys, or can you get away with someone who's maybe more of a project on the defensive side of the ball? I think they could. You look at Duncan Robinson getting minutes for the Miami Heat in the finals. He's not good defensively, and it works within the system. Is that something that the Pelicans should try and do, should try and replicate? And is that the move that would be best for them? Or is drafting a guy like Leonard Miller, Coulibaly, the way to go for the team? The draft philosophy stuff I find pretty interesting. I think once you've got established players, just get solid NBA players in the door. Keegan Murray is never going to be an all-star. He's never going to be an all-star. I would love to have Keegan Murray on this team. I liked him going into the draft. I thought 4 might be a little too high for him, but at like 7, if he was there for the Pelicans, I would have jumped all over that. So sometimes you don't need all the potential and you just need guys that are going to help you win games. Even if their ceiling is somewhat limited, when you have the guys with the unlimited ceilings, Zion Williamson, Brandon Ingram has one, but it's still pretty high, and he's an all-star level player. So when you have those guys, you don't need to stress about the other things as much, and you can just build smartly and not go for the boom or bust prospects. But if they want to, these guys all have the potential to be really good. Leonard Miller could be great. Coulibaly could be great if he figures out the offense. And then Maxwell Lewis and Brandin Podziemski could really be great as well. Let's take a look at them. Let's combine them into one segment coming up here next in today's episode of Locked On Pelicans. And thank you for making Locked On Pelicans your first listen today and every day. We're here Monday through Friday, breaking down everything you want to know about this Pelicans team, looking at all of the draft prospects that you want to hear. We got the community mock draft coming soon. I'll probably start putting that together tomorrow. So let me know on Twitter. Don't put it in the comments down below because I may miss it. DM me on Twitter. My DMs are open, or just tweet at me that you want to be part of the Locked On Pelicans community mock draft. We did it last year. It was a lot of fun. You'll get assigned a team. When it's your time, you'll see the list of players picked. You make your pick. You give me a couple of sentences, and I'll read it here on the show, and we share it out with your Twitter handle and everything. So let me know on Twitter if that's something you want to be a part of. If you want to support the channel, best thing you can do, become an everydayer. Because if you message me and you're like, I want to be in, and then you ask me a question that I answered on the show, I know you're not listening every day. It's okay, but it'd be better if you did. So make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts and on YouTube. So let's look at a couple of more players here. Boom or bust kind of guys. High ceiling, potentially low floors. And I want to start with Maxwell Lewis. Sophomore out of Pepperdine. He's a wing at 6'6", 7-foot wingspan. He's a sophomore. And this dude can score. This guy can absolutely light it up and score. And when you look at him, he projects to be a 3-and-D guy that should stick in the league at the very least, but I think has the potential to be an all-star level scorer. 17 points per game at Pepperdine last season, over 35% from 3, 2.8 assists, 6 rebounds per. And man, there's a lot to like about him. He's a very good ball handler and doesn't turn it over, for the most part, a ton. He's a good athlete with a lot of those effortless strides, right? Takes big steps, gets to the rim pretty easily when you need to, hits every kind of three-pointer, and just has this shot-making ability that you dig. You watch him play and you're like, oh, I see it. And then you get to the concerns about him. And this is one for a lot of these guys too. And that is, against top-level competition, he wasn't great. 13 games against top 100 teams in college last year, and he really struggled. He turned the ball over nearly 25% of the time. 1 out of every 4 times he had the ball, he turned it over. He also shot poorly compared to his other averages. He isn't as experienced as others, kind of picking up competitive basketball, organized basketball much later. And Pepperdine was a terrible team, just 9 wins last year. And so late in the shot clock, teams just doubled and tripled him, and that was kind of it. So playing against top-level competition, he struggled and really, did well against subpar competition. What does that say going into the NBA where everyone's really good? And that scares me. But he has such a good feel for the game, knowing how to play, knowing how to create space, knowing how to get to his spots and get his shot off. He also has a lot of creativity in his scoring. He can be a 20-plus per game scorer in the NBA, or kind of reach near that level. His ceiling is really, really high, and he's a very good defender too. He works well off ball as well. And when you just look at him, he's going to be just versatile on the defensive side of the ball and do everything you need him to do offensively. And it makes him so intriguing. He's just a great shooter with solid mechanics. He can play with his back to the basket too, has really good court vision. As I said, he can cut. Despite him not playing against big, good teams, I don't know. Someone's going to take a flyer on him. And if you hit on a pick like that, that ceiling is so high that he's an all-star level guy that you found when you shouldn't have. That can change the course of your franchise. It's a little bit different for Brandin Podziemski. Santa Clara is a guard, sophomore, 6'4", 6'6" wingspan. And the big concern for him is playing against top-level competition. He did not do well compared to the rest of them. He is a scorer too. 20 points per game, shot 44% from 3, 3.7 assists. He kind of just does everything, and he's a real fun, just hustle guy to watch. And that's important to keep in mind with him. And when he played lower level teams, he wouldn't miss. He wouldn't miss. He wrecked lower level competition. He basically never missed from 3. And he also has an excellent shot selection as is. And he shoots well from 3 on high volume too. Against better competition, his lack of athleticism, he's not at the same level of an athlete as the other 3 guys are, particularly the first 2 in Miller and Coulibaly. Against better competition, that lack of athleticism really hurt him, and you saw him get less separation, which forced him to take tough shots. But the thing is, those tough shots still went in for the most part. And when you look at just his feel for the game, a guy that's out there on the court and you're like, oh, this dude gets it. Whether that's basketball IQ or something else, he has that feel for the game. And you just feel like he's going to be able to contribute through like pure willpower, determination, and hustle alone. And when you can have a pull-up 3 that he does, maybe you need a guy like that on your team. I don't know if he projects to be an all-star given what his role would be at the NBA level. But if you could just nail 3s like that and make hustle plays, Josh Hart's getting paid in the NBA, y'all. And we loved a guy like Josh Hart. And you can see some of that here as a big guard that can go out and do a lot of those things. So having a guy like that is useful. There's potential that if that 3-point shot doesn't work or the lack of athleticism doesn't pan out at the NBA level, that he might not nearly be as impactful as you would hope for a pick in the lottery at 14, even at the end of the lottery. But those intangibles, those other things, basically for all of these guys, oh man, the ceilings are high for the most part for them. And so do you go for that, or do you play it safe with some other players that you're like, this guy's going to be good, but he'll never be an all-star, but we don't need another all-star on this team? Or in a small market, are you thinking about sustainability, thinking long-term? All of those are going to be factors and important. And when it comes to team building and what the Pelicans want to be, not just next season, but beyond. So let me know. What do you think about Miller, Coulibaly, Lewis, or Podziemski? Is there anyone that stands out above the others, or rank them all for me in the comments down below on YouTube? I think it's super intriguing. All of these guys, the 4 most intriguing prospects in the draft. Tomorrow, for the everydayers, let's look at Brandon Ingram on Team USA, take a break from the draft talk, then we'll get back to the draft talk on Friday and look at Scoot Henderson. And there's a reason I'm bringing it up, and trading for Scoot Henderson. That's Friday's episode of Locked On Pelicans. Make sure you're an everydayer so you don't miss an episode. Brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Jake Madison, at NOLA Jake on Twitter, and I'll be back with y'all tomorrow to talk about Brandon Ingram.